2 dogs lived here, and many others have visited. Disneyland had a pet hotel, a place where guests dropped off their cats, dogs, and a few other strange animals. And even though it's been closed for years, the building, the sign, the details is all still hiding in plain sight, if you know where to look. This is the story of Disneyland's rich history with dogs. Brickey here. Today's episode features several Disneyland oddities, all about dogs and how they shape Disneyland. A couple of stories I guarantee you've never heard before. Before we get started, what do you say? Subscribe to the channel, because that's the best way to keep time traveling with me. Because you know what we do on this channel? We study Disneyland's past, which is what we're doing today, so we can better predict its future. I'm so happy that you showed up. You would think Walt Disney thought of everything. A castle, a jungle, flying elephants, even a rocket to the moon. But just 4 days before Disneyland opened, one newspaper headline called him out. It seems Walt Disney had forgot one thing: the dogs. Back in 1955, The Independent ran a piece that said Walt's first Disneyland brochure made a huge mistake. In the brochure was a single line that read, "We love animals too, but please don't bring your pets. They won't be permitted in the park." And that one innocent little line set off a storm. People accused Walt of being a hypocrite. A man who built his entire empire on talking animals suddenly turned his back on the real ones. Writers even joked that Mickey Mouse and Pluto would be ashamed. This is ridiculous, but real, but real. Now, of course, Walt wasn't anti-animal, but Disneyland was built for people, not pets. But public opinion didn't see it that way. So just days before opening, Disney quietly pulled the line from the brochures and promised to figure something out. And in all fairness, he did. Because soon, Disneyland would create a brand new solution for man's best friend. A solution that not only welcomed dogs back into the story, but also tried to fix a much more serious problem that was happening in the Disneyland parking lot. A few years after opening day, Walt Disney finally made good on his promise to figure something out. And in 1958, Disneyland opened its very own on-site pet hotel, Kennel Land. I guess Kennel Land? Name's confusing, especially when you're dyslexic. The name came from Kennel Ration. Kennel Ration? I don't know. The dog food brand owned by Quaker Oats, who sponsored the entire operation. Like everything else in Disneyland's early years, sponsorship was what made it possible. Walt had the ideas, but it was corporate partners who helped turn them into reality. And Kennel Land offered families a safe, convenient spot to leave their pets for the day. Originally, it held 99 dogs or cats of all sizes. Now, in typical Disney fashion, they made a spectacle of the grand opening. They even had Old Yeller's grandson, Duke, as part of a photo op, along with a child star, who I honestly don't know who he is. Kevin Cochran? But they made a spectacle to officially welcome men's best friend into the Disneyland story. Walt had finally fixed one of his few opening day oversights in a classic Disney fashion: the charm, the practicality, and just a little help from a sponsor. And nearly 70 years later, the building is still there, surprisingly frozen in time. Now, here is what I found fascinating about the pet hotel. Because Disney didn't just build a place to put your dog, they engineered a very crafty solution of responsibility and liability. The kennel sat only 100 feet outside Disneyland's front gate. So, super easy for guests to drop off and pick up at the beginning and end of their day. And for probably some more irresponsible pet owners, a reminder of like, oh yeah, we brought our dog here today. But to me, the real magic wasn't the air conditioning or the cute little suites. It was the system that they created. You see, Walt wanted his guests to have peace of mind and wanted the dogs to obviously be safe, but he didn't want Disneyland to be responsible for someone's pet. So Disneyland, or maybe even Imagineering, did what they do best. They solved the problem with smart design. Each kennel worked like a locker. You'd walk up, place your pet inside, close the door, and walk away. The key would stay with you and only with you. The owner was the only one who ever directly touched the animal. There were little slots that were put in the doors so the Disneyland staff could give them water or give them food. And in the early days, due to sponsorship, you got a free can of food with your booking. By today's standards, I don't think anybody would just give their dog a random container of food. That's not how it works anymore. But this allowed the Disneyland staff to monitor and care for the dogs without ever actually touching them. It was not only clever, it was the definition of creative problem solving. My favorite thing to study at Disneyland. So really, a perfect balance between hospitality and liability. Eventually, the setup grew to let Disneyland care for about 150 animals, dogs, cats, birds, and even the unusual guest. And we will come back to that later because people dropped off way more than cats and dogs. But for decades, families trusted that little building just outside the gates as a safe home base for their pets as they explored the park. And while it's one thing to leave your dog at the Disneyland Pet Hotel for the day, another group of guests back in the opening days actually got a chance to take their dogs for a walk inside the park, down Main Street, USA, in what is one of the rarest Disneyland oddities I've ever been able to dig up. There have been two famous dogs who live at Disneyland. One real, one who's a legend. But even the park's most loyal pup isn't immune to change, because not too long ago, Pluto lost his house. From 1993 to 2022, Pluto's doghouse stood right here in Mickey's Toontown, a little hot dog stand styled after Pluto's own cartoon home. With red bricks and signature yellow on its siding and covered in sausages, every dog's dream. It looked exactly like where you'd expect to find the park's most famous dog. But when Disneyland decided to redesign Toontown, the doghouse disappeared. The park wanted to make more space for families, rest areas, and a brand new attraction, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And somewhere in all that progress, Pluto's home was quietly left behind. But it's also a reminder that nothing at Disneyland ever stays the same for too long. Even here, the neighborhoods had to evolve. And while Pluto seems to be the only Fab 5 member without a home at Disneyland, we'll come back to that later, along with another very famous dog, real dog, that lived in Disneyland not too far away from where I'm standing. It's one of my all-time favorite Disneyland fun facts. It's a moment where it makes the park feel so more real. And a beloved Disney animation who happens to feature my favorite character that I use for all my Disney avatars. There's another group of dogs we need to talk about. Ones who didn't just visit Disneyland, they actually got to walk down Main Street, USA. Now here's one of those Disneyland oddities that's almost too strange to believe, because it shows how much more of a community park Disneyland was in its opening days. It exudes the innocence from a different time that many of us could never imagine. Because once there was a time when guests could actually walk their dog down Main Street, USA. And I'm not talking about service dogs, those are still allowed today. I'm talking about pets. In 1958, Disneyland hosted what they called the Kids Amateur Dog Show, a full-blown competition for local kids and their four-legged best friends. Sponsored, of course, by Kennel Ration, the same company behind Kennel Land, Disneyland's new pet hotel. This event was equal parts community outreach and pure marketing genius. Kids from all over Orange County entered qualifying shows for a chance to compete in the semifinals here at Disneyland. Top dogs and their owners, ages 6 to 14, earned the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to parade right down Main Street, USA. Imagine walking your dog on Main Street, USA, how it would make it feel even more real. And now imagine 85 kids and their dogs marching past the Emporium, the Disneyland band playing alongside them, and guests cheering from the curb. And that cheer would be how one dog would be voted most popular. The kid would get a new bicycle, the dog would get a new blanket, and the other contestants would get a Kodak camera? Art Linkletter has his hands all over the first decade of Disneyland. Awards went out for largest dog, longest ears, longest tail, shortest natural tail, most spots, best trick, and even best costume. Like this little Dodger right here. Or is that a Dodger? I don't know. I'll leave that stuff to Provost. Of course, it wasn't all prizes and applause. The event also included, and this is the most insane thing about this whole story, and why I love doing this series and digging deep to find something that I guarantee you 99% of you have never heard before. Because the event also included a contest called Name the Puppy. And in this contest, the winner actually received as a reward a puppy. That is insane. That is something that feels wildly irresponsible by today's standards, but somehow completely on brand for mid-century America when it seemed like there were no rules. But looking back, it's easy to see what Disney was doing here. This wasn't just a dog show, it was brilliant community building. And that's what it had to do in the opening years. By turning Disneyland into a place where local kids could make memories with their pets, Disney planted roots that would grow for generations. If you were one of those kids who walked down Main Street with your dog, there's a good chance you brought your own kids and eventually grandkids back to share the place where you had that childhood magic. This tradition happened every spring into the mid-60s. Had about an 8-year run. So this wasn't a one-off. And while some dogs got the full VIP treatment, not every story in Disneyland's pet history has a happy ending. Because behind all the wholesome fun comes another oddity, a sadder reason why the kennel had to exist in the first place. Before Disneyland built the kennel, there was a serious problem in the parking lot. Because pets weren't allowed inside the park, many visitors, especially those traveling long distances, left their dogs waiting in their cars. And under the California sun, that was sometimes a deadly mistake. Reports from the 50s described dogs suffering heat exhaustion, or worse, while their families spent the day inside the park. It's one of those sad realities that seems obvious today, but at the time, people just didn't know better. And that's really where the story of Disneyland's kennel began. It wasn't just about convenience, it was about compassion, creating a safe place where pets could be cared for while their families enjoyed the park. Sadly, this still does happen today, and it doesn't need to. With just a quick Google search, I found endless places and services right near the park to make sure your pet is taken care of while you Disney for the day. And seriously, if you run one of the local pet hotels that now provide the same service for Disneyland guests, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me. I'd love to feature your business as a modern solution for families who want to bring their dogs to the happiest place on earth safely. Because no dog should ever be left unattended in a car for more than a few minutes, much less several hours. Because this story, like Disneyland itself, has always been about the learning and improving, that's something Walt Disney understood better than anyone. But before we get to how Walt's own dog helped inspire Disneyland, we need to take a quick detour into one of the kennel's most bizarre guests. Because someone decided to check in their pet monkey, and that didn't work out well for anyone. But before we get to that, the one thing I never monkey around with is my dog Uncle Larry's health. Today's video is sponsored by the Farmer's Dog. They've helped us make sure Uncle Larry's eating real, fresh, human-grade food that's conveniently delivered to our front door. We rescued Larry back in 2018 from the Malibu fires. We honestly had no idea what kind of dog we were falling in love with. And then we did a DNA test, and turns out he's a Chihuahua. After owning bull terriers for a decade, somehow we fell in love with the Chihuahua. But Uncle Larry is the sweetest dog we've ever owned. Calm, gentle, total gentleman on a leash, and absolutely obsessed with his family walks. But food used to be a problem. We started with kibble, and Larry just never seemed comfortable. He'd bounce between constipation and an upset stomach. We switched him to the Farmer's Dog, and honestly, everything changed. His digestion evened out, his weight's been perfect ever since, and he's actually excited to eat now. One of my favorite things about this company, beyond the convenience and the food itself, is how well designed the entire system is. Each pack is pre-portioned with his name printed right on it, so it's impossible to forget if he's been fed. The reusable container is sized perfectly to hold one pack at a time. It's such a simple detail, but it makes daily feeding effortless. As a designer, I appreciate when a product solves problems you didn't even realize were adding stress. And Uncle Larry loves to make a show out of it. His favorite way to eat is with an audience. He'll actually run around the house and try to round us up so we can both watch him. We started a habit of cheering him on to eat for his good food, which now is a term that he knows and will come running when he hears us chanted in the house. But for us, the biggest thing the farmer dog gives is peace of mind. We know we are giving Larry his best shot at staying healthy and going the distance, because he's the bright spot of both of our days, and we just want as many days with him as we can get. If you'd like to try it for your own dog, you can get 50% off your first box of freshly made healthy dog food, plus free shipping and 24/7 customer support by using my link below or scanning the QR code. It is a subscription that renews automatically, but you can cancel it at any time. On behalf of me and Uncle Larry, a big thank you to the Farmer's Dog for sponsoring today's video and for making a product we both genuinely love. Now, Disneyland's kennel wasn't just for dogs. Technically, the rule said pets of all kinds. And apparently, people took that as a challenge. And you know, if California is rich on anything, it's eccentric people. So over the years, the Little Pet Motel became home to some of the strangest guests ever to check in on Disneyland property. So obviously, dogs and cats were common. But you could also, over the years, find rabbits, parrots, iguanas, a ferret until they got outlawed, and even a skunk. But don't forget, chickens, pigs, mice, birds, and even snakes. Why does it always have to be snakes? But now let's get to the Pet Hall of Fame. One guest supposedly showed up with a cricket in a bamboo cage, which is either poetic or insane, depending on how you look at it. I'd lean more towards the second. And then there were the big ones. Someone brought mountain lion cubs, and somebody else even once brought a horse. It had to be a mini horse. Beyond all of the strange animals that checked in, there's one story that reigns above the rest. Once, somebody brought their pet monkey and checked them in for the day. And monkeys are gonna do what monkeys are gonna do. And the monkey escaped from its cage and allegedly terrified not only the staff, but the other animals for the duration of the afternoon until the owners came back to get the monkey. See, back then, people didn't have cell phones, and they don't do announcements through Disneyland. So the monkey literally had a reign of terror. It's one of those Disneyland oddities that perfectly sums up early Disneyland. Equal parts wonder, optimism, and sometimes complete chaos. That was the day that Disneyland had 2 Adventurelands. Maybe it's fitting that the kennel ended up being full of chaos, because Disneyland itself has always been a balance between wild imagination and careful design. And for Walt Disney, that balance started with one loyal dog who changed the way that he saw the world and the way he designed Disneyland. It's often the smallest, most personal moments that explain who Walt Disney really was. And few things in his life reveal that better than his love for dogs. It's no coincidence that the old Disneyland kennel was decorated with murals from Lady and the Tramp. And one of those 2 dogs would actually call Disneyland their home. That story about loyalty, love, and seeing the world through a dog's eyes came straight from Walt's own home. Because for Walt, inspiration didn't come from studios or boardrooms. It came from life, observing the world around him, from a dog, not unlike himself, that just wanted a hot dog at the end of a long day. Every night after work, Walt would come home to his poodle, loyally waiting for him by the kitchen door. He'd open the fridge, grab 2 uncooked hot dogs, one for himself, one for her, and use it to playfully guide her around the room before finally giving her the treat. That small moment of joy became a light bulb for how people moved through Disneyland. Walt realized that guests, just like the dog, would follow something they love if the reward was worth the journey. That's why Sleeping Beauty Castle stands at the end of Main Street, and why every land in Disneyland has a visual reward at the end of the path. And this wouldn't be the only time that a dog in Walt's personal life would inspire his professional life as an artist and a storyteller. Years earlier, on Christmas morning, Walt gave his wife Lillian a surprise, a little chow puppy hidden inside of a hat box. That moment of love and laughter later inspired one of the most iconic scenes in the history of Disney animation, when Jim Deere gives Darling a puppy in Lady and the Tramp, a simple family memory turned into a piece of pop culture magic. That's who Walt was. Someone who turned his own experiences into lessons, and those lessons into timeless stories. He didn't just design a theme park, he designed feelings. And even though so much of that original park has evolved or disappeared, his fingerprints and paw prints are still everywhere. In the details, the emotions, and even in the forgotten corners of Disneyland that still carry his personal touch. Because if you know where to look, you can still find the places where Walt's imagination and his dogs left their mark. When Disneyland shut down in March of 2020, the plan was simple: 2 weeks to flatten the curve and then reopen. But when the gates finally swung back open 440 days later, one of the pieces of Disneyland that never came back is the now abandoned Disneyland Kennel Club. For the first time since 1958, the little building that once welcomed family pets sits quiet. No barking, no visitors, just another relic of the park's long and strange evolution. But if you know where to look, you can still find traces of the park that goes back to nearly the opening days. The adjusted sign is here, the famous Dutch double doors, the buzzer to check in, the little plaque where you fill out your paperwork before you drop your dog off. You can even look above and see that the dog run is still there. I can even look over the gate and see the Lady and the Tramp printed scrim is still hanging on for dear life on the space right here where people used to let their pets run around and stretch their legs and take a potty break. 2010, Disneyland added a brand new stroller, wheelchair, and ECV rental center near the main entrance. Push this building back behind the guest view. But if you peer over the wall, you can still see the original sign that goes way back in Disney's history. So the new building didn't replace the kennel, it just simply covered it. But it's still back there. Behind the 2010 building, the original 1958 building still stands. Walls, roofline, and even a few of its notable details just hiding in plain sight. And that's the fun of digging into Disneyland's rich history. So much of it never disappears. It just gets built over and folded into something new. And even though the kennel's doors are shut for good, the dogs haven't left. Today, the park is home to a different kind of working dog. The highly trained canine units help to keep Disneyland safe. After 2015, when new security measures were introduced, bomb-sniffing dogs became part of Disneyland's security gates. And as someone who comes to the park often, when I get to see the working dogs taking their break, playing ball with their co-workers, backstage or near the gates, I often have to remind myself, can I pet that dog? No, you cannot pet that dog, even though I really want to. But of course, there's still one very good boy who never left Disneyland, Pluto. And you see, he didn't really lose his home, he just changed businesses. Pluto's doghouse was never supposed to be his actual home, it was a hot dog stand that maybe he and Mickey went into business together on. Many of us love to name businesses after our pets. Why would Mickey be any different? So when Toontown was redesigned, he simply upgraded, closing the doghouse and opening Good Boy Grocer. Now every member of the Fab Five has a place in Toontown once again. And for Pluto's real home, it's with his best friend Mickey, just like our dogs live with us. And while Pluto may be Disneyland's most famous dog, he's not the only dog who lived here at Disneyland. Because once upon a time, there was a real dog who called Disneyland home. The stray that inspired Lady and the Tramp. He was the stray that Disney adopted to model Tramp after. When they were done making the movie, Tramp relocated to Disneyland, where he would spend out his final years living here in the park with the Popes. And who are the Popes? Well, I'm glad you asked. To learn more about their story as the only people to ever call Disneyland home, watch this video next. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you showed up. I appreciate you. And give your dog a walk today and tell him I said what's up.